I found the insurance policy while cleaning out my childhood home after Dad's funeral. $800,000 on my baby sister Emma, purchased when she was just 4 months old. She died at 24 months. Mom collected every penny. For 30 years, Mom never spoke Emma's name, removed every photo, erased her from our family history like she never existed. I spent my whole life thinking Emma died from sudden infant death syndrome. But that policy changed everything. It had a date, a beneficiary, and a motive I couldn't ignore. My name is Alfonso, and 2 weeks ago, I buried my father. I'm 34 years old, married to Sarah, and we have 2 kids, Tyler, who's 8, and Hannah, who's 6. We live in Columbus, Ohio, where I work as an accountant for a mid-sized firm. Life has been good, normal, predictable, until Dad died of a heart attack at 68, and I had to go back to Cincinnati to help my mother sort through his estate. Mom, Laura, has always been cold. Not abusive, just distant. The kind of mother who made sure I was fed and clothed but never hugged me, never asked about my day, never showed much interest in my life beyond the basics. Dad was the warm one, the one who came to my baseball games, who helped with homework, who actually seemed to care. I always figured Mom was just built that way. Some people aren't naturally affectionate. I accepted it. When I arrived at my childhood home on Maple Street, Mom was already going through Dad's papers in the study. She barely looked up when I walked in. No hug, no tears. Just a curt nod and a gesture toward a stack of file boxes. "Start with those," she said. "Tax documents going back 7 years. We need to organize them for the estate lawyer." I spent the first day sorting through mundane paperwork. Bank statements, utility bills, investment portfolios. Dad had been meticulous about record keeping. Everything was labeled, dated, filed perfectly. It was almost soothing, going through his organized life, feeling close to him through his careful handwriting on folder tabs. By the second day, Mom seemed anxious to get me out of the house. She kept suggesting I'd done enough, that she could handle the rest, that I should get back to Sarah and the kids. But there was still so much to do, and honestly, I wanted to be there. This house held my childhood, and Dad's presence was everywhere. I wasn't ready to leave yet. That afternoon, Mom went to the grocery store. I decided to search the basement for older tax records the lawyer had requested. The basement was cluttered with decades of accumulated possessions. Old furniture, holiday decorations, boxes of books. I navigated through the maze of stuff until I reached the back corner where Dad kept his filing cabinets. Behind an old stack of paint cans, I noticed a metal box I'd never seen before. It was about the size of a shoebox, dark green, with a small lock on the front. Something about it seemed deliberately hidden. I tried the lock, secured tight. I went back upstairs to Dad's desk and started searching drawers. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of old greeting cards, I found a small key on a plain ring. My hands were shaking as I went back down to the basement. I don't know why I felt so nervous. It was probably just more documents. The key fit perfectly. The lock clicked open. Inside were papers I'd never seen before. Right on top was a birth certificate. Emma Grace, born March 15th, 1992. My sister. I knew she'd existed, knew she'd died as a baby, but I'd never seen any documentation of her life. Mom had removed every trace of her from our home. Beneath the birth certificate were hospital records from Emma's birth. A healthy baby girl, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, no complications. Then more medical records from her 4-month checkup. Thriving, the doctor had noted. Meeting all developmental milestones. And then I found it. A life insurance policy from Nationwide, dated July 20th, 1992. When Emma was exactly 4 months old. The policy was for $800,000. In 1992, that was an enormous amount for a baby. The beneficiary was listed as Laura Jensen, my mother. My mouth went dry. I kept digging through the box. Emma's death certificate was near the bottom. November 18th, 1994. Cause of death: positional asphyxiation, accidental suffocation. She was 24 months old, almost 2 years old. 20 months after that massive insurance policy had been purchased. I pulled out my phone and did quick math. $800,000 in 1994 would be worth about $1.5 million today. That money had paid off this house, had funded my college education, had given us a comfortable life. I heard the garage door opening. Mom was home. I shoved everything back into the box except the insurance policy, which I folded and put in my pocket. My heart was hammering as I locked the box and pushed it back behind the paint cans. When I came upstairs, Mom was putting away groceries. She looked at me sharply. "You're sweating," she said. "What were you doing down there?" "Just moving some heavy boxes around," I lied. "Found the tax records." She studied me for a moment. Her eyes narrowed. Then she turned back to the groceries. "Good. You should head home tomorrow. I can finish up here." That evening, after she'd gone to bed, I sat in Dad's study and looked at the insurance policy under the desk lamp. The date stood out like an accusation. 4 months old. Who takes out an $800,000 policy on a 4-month-old baby? I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Emma. I was 4 when she died, so my memories of her are vague and dreamlike. I remember a baby crying sometimes. I remember Dad holding a bundle wrapped in a yellow blanket. But Mom had never talked about her. Not once in 30 years. Not a single mention. Not a single story. Not a single acknowledgement that Emma had existed. The next morning at breakfast, I put the policy on the table between us. Mom's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. Her face went completely white, then flushed red. "Where did you find that?" "In a box in the basement. A box that was hidden, along with Emma's birth certificate and death certificate." "You had no right," she hissed. "Those are private documents." $800,000, Mom, on a 4-month-old baby, 20 months before she died. Mom stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "How dare you? How dare you come into my home and accuse me of something?" "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm asking a question." Emma died in her crib. Sudden infant death syndrome. It was a tragedy. The insurance was your father's idea. He worried about everything. He wanted to make sure we'd be okay if anything happened. The policy lists you as the purchaser. Dad's signature isn't on it. Her hands were shaking. She gripped the edge of the table. "Get out. Get out of my house right now." "Mom, I just want to understand." "There's nothing to understand," she screamed. "My baby died. It destroyed me. I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't look at pictures of her. Do you know what it's like to lose a child? Do you?" I felt a wave of guilt crash over me. She was right. I didn't know what that was like. Maybe I was seeing shadows where there was only grief. Maybe the insurance was just unfortunate timing. Maybe I was a terrible son for even questioning her. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I'm sorry for bringing it up. I know it must be painful." She sat back down, her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook. Was she crying? I couldn't tell. After a moment, she looked up at me with red eyes. "The insurance money kept us afloat. Your father's business was struggling. We were about to lose this house. Emma's death was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But at least the insurance meant we didn't lose everything else too. Can you understand that? Can you let me grieve in peace?" I nodded. I felt like garbage. I packed my things and prepared to leave. As I was carrying my bag to the car, I noticed something on the floor near the basement door. A piece of paper that must have fallen out of the box when I'd hastily shoved everything back. I picked it up. It was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. The headline read, "Police Investigate Infant Death." The article was from the Cincinnati Enquirer, dated November 21st, 1994, 3 days after Emma died. I read it quickly, my pulse racing. The article stated that police were investigating the death of 24-month-old Emma Jensen as suspicious due to an unusually large life insurance policy taken out shortly before the child's death. The investigation was ongoing. Someone had tried to burn this clipping. The edges were singed and blackened. I looked up. Mom was standing in the doorway, watching me read. Our eyes met. And in that moment, I saw something in her expression that made my blood run cold. Not grief, not sadness. Something else entirely. Something calculating. "You should go," she said quietly. "And Alfonso, don't come back." The 3-hour drive back to Columbus felt like an eternity. My mind was spinning. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that grief made people act strangely, that Mom's coldness was just her way of coping. But I couldn't shake the image of that burned newspaper clipping. Why would she try to destroy an article about Emma's death being investigated? When I got home, Sarah took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. I told her I was just exhausted from dealing with estate paperwork. I couldn't tell her what I'd found. Not yet. Not until I knew more. That night, after Sarah and the kids were asleep, I sat in my home office and started searching online. I found the Cincinnati Enquirer archives and located more articles about Emma's death. There were 3 of them, published over the course of a week. The first article, from the day after Emma died, was straightforward. Infant found unresponsive, pronounced dead at scene, investigation pending. The second article was the one I'd found at Mom's house. The third article, published 4 days later, stated that police had closed the investigation. Death ruled accidental positional asphyxiation. Mother cleared of all suspicion after passing polygraph test and providing alibi. No charges filed. But something bothered me. I kept reading and rereading the articles. Emma had been found face down in her crib, suffocated by bedding. But at 24 months, almost 2 years old, most toddlers can roll over easily, can push blankets off their faces. The articles mentioned this too. They noted it was unusual for a child that age to die from positional asphyxiation. I found the name of the lead detective on the case, Frank Morrison. I spent an hour tracking him down through public records databases. He'd retired from the Cincinnati Police Department in 2008. Further searching revealed he was now living in a nursing facility in Dayton, Ohio. I called the facility the next morning. After some convincing, they agreed to pass along my number to Mr. Morrison if he was willing to speak with me. 2 hours later, my phone rang. "This is Frank Morrison," a gravelly voice said. "You called about the Emma Jensen case." "Yes, sir. I'm Alfonso Jensen. Emma was my sister." There was a long pause. "I remember that case. I remember it very well. You want to know what really happened?" "Yes, sir. Come see me. Don't talk about this on the phone." The next day was Saturday. I told Sarah I needed to visit an old friend in Dayton. The lies were piling up, but I couldn't burden her with this yet. Not until I knew what I was dealing with. Shady Oaks Assisted Living was a depressing brick building on the outskirts of Dayton. I found Frank Morrison in the common room, a thin man with wispy white hair and sharp blue eyes. He was 72 but looked older, his face lined with years of hard cases. We sat in a quiet corner. He studied me for a long moment. "You look like your father," he said finally. "Robert was a good man. I was sorry to hear he passed." "You knew my father?" "He came to see me. About 6 months before he died. Wanted to talk about Emma. Said he'd been carrying something heavy for a long time, but then he got scared and left. Never came back." My stomach dropped. "What did he want to tell you?" "Never got that far, but I could see it in his eyes." "Your father knew something about Emma's death. Something that haunted him. Tell me what you remember about the investigation." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "I've been a cop for 42 years. You develop instincts. The Emma Jensen case felt wrong from the start. That insurance policy was the biggest red flag I'd ever seen. 800 grand on a baby. But your mother had answers for everything. Said your father was paranoid, overprotective, wanted to make sure the family would be okay if anything happened. She cried in all the right places. She passed the polygraph clean. But you didn't believe her." "No, I didn't. Emma was a healthy kid. No medical issues. No history of breathing problems. And she was almost 2 years old. At that age, kids don't just suffocate on bedding. They move. They roll. They push things off their face. The autopsy was inconclusive. Could have been accidental. Could have been deliberate. No way to prove it either way. So you closed the case." "I had no choice. No evidence of foul play. Your mother's alibi checked out. She was home alone with Emma that afternoon. Your father was at work. She said she put Emma down for a nap at 1 in the afternoon. Checked on her at 3. Found her unresponsive. Called 911 immediately. By the time paramedics arrived, Emma had been dead for at least an hour, maybe longer. Was there anything else? Anything that didn't make it into the newspapers? Morrison hesitated. Then he stood up slowly. Follow me. We went to his room. He pulled a cardboard box from his closet and set it on the bed. Inside were old case files, photos, documents. I kept copies, he said, against regulations, but I couldn't let it go. Read this. He handed me a witness statement. It was from a neighbor, Patricia Brennan, who lived 3 houses down from my childhood home. The statement was dated November 20th, 1994, 2 days after Emma died. Mrs. Brennan stated that on the afternoon of November 18th, at approximately 1:30 in the afternoon, she heard a baby crying from the Jensen residence. The crying continued for nearly 30 minutes, becoming increasingly frantic. Then, at approximately 2 o'clock, there was sudden silence. Mrs. Brennan found this unusual because the baby had sounded distressed, and the crying had stopped abruptly rather than gradually tapering off as it would if the child had fallen asleep. I looked up at Morrison. Why wasn't this investigated further? Your mother said Emma had been sleeping peacefully. Said the baby Mrs. Brennan heard must have been from another house. Sound carries in neighborhoods. Without more evidence, we couldn't pursue it. Do you know if Mrs. Brennan still lives in the neighborhood? Last I knew, she did. She'd be in her 80s now. Morrison pulled out another document. There's something else you need to know. Something I only learned recently. He handed me a letter. It was from a life insurance company, dated 6 months ago, addressed to the Cincinnati Police Department, Cold Case Division. The letter stated that they were contacting the department regarding a recent claim filed by Laura Jensen for a $1 million life insurance policy on her deceased husband, Robert Jensen. The policy had been taken out 8 months before Robert's death. Given that Mrs. Jensen had previously been investigated in connection with another suspicious death involving life insurance, they wanted to notify authorities as a matter of due diligence. The room started spinning. My father's death was investigated? Not officially. The insurance company just sent a notification. Your father died of a heart attack at home. Natural causes. 68 years old. No autopsy was performed, because there was no reason to suspect anything unusual. Except the life insurance policy. Except that. Morrison looked at me hard. Son, you need to be very careful. If your mother killed Emma, and if she killed your father, she's gotten away with it twice. People like that don't stop, and they don't like loose ends. I drove home in a daze. My mother had taken out a massive life insurance policy on my father, right before he died of a sudden heart attack. A man who had no history of heart disease. A man who had tried to tell a retired detective something about Emma's death 6 months before he died. When I got home, I went straight to my office and called my father's doctor in Cincinnati. I explained I was handling estate matters and needed Dad's medical records for insurance purposes. After some back and forth and faxed authorization forms, they agreed to send them. The records arrived by email 2 days later. I read through them carefully. My father had been in excellent health. His last physical, 3 months before his death, showed no signs of heart disease. His cholesterol was good. His blood pressure was normal. He exercised regularly. The doctor's notes specifically stated, patient in remarkable health for his age. No cardiovascular concerns. Yet 6 weeks later, he was dead from a massive heart attack. I made a decision. I contacted a private investigator I'd worked with on fraud cases for my accounting firm. His name was Marcus, and he was thorough, discreet, and expensive. I told him I needed him to dig into my mother's background. All of it. Every place she'd lived, every job she'd held, everything he could find. How deep do you want me to go? Marcus asked. All the way back, to before she met my father. I need to know everything. That'll take some time. And it won't be cheap. I don't care about the cost. 3 weeks later, Marcus called me. We need to meet. Not at your office, not at your home. Somewhere public. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Columbus. Marcus slid a thick folder across the table. His face was grim. Your mother is not who you think she is. I opened the folder. The first document was a timeline of Laura's life. She'd moved 11 times in her adult life, roughly every 5 to 7 years. Each time to a different city. Cincinnati was her most recent location, where she'd lived for 34 years. Before that, she'd been in Toledo, then Cleveland, then Pittsburgh, then Atlanta, then Charlotte. That's unusual, Marcus said. Most people don't relocate that frequently unless their job requires it. Your mother never had a career that would necessitate that kind of mobility. The next document made my hands shake. It was a marriage certificate from 1985. Laura Patterson married Dennis Kramer in Charlotte, North Carolina. Your mother was married before your father, Marcus said. Did you know that? I shook my head. Dennis Kramer died in 1987. Carbon monoxide poisoning. Fell asleep in his car in the garage with the engine running. Accidental death. Your mother collected $200,000 in life insurance. My coffee went cold in my hands. 2 years of marriage and he's dead. There's more. Marcus pulled out another document. Dennis Kramer had a brother, Carl Kramer. Still alive, living in Phoenix. I spoke with him. He never believed Dennis's death was an accident. Dennis was planning to divorce your mother. He'd discovered she was forging checks from his business account. Carl says Dennis told him, and I quote, "If anything happens to me, it's Laura." Did he go to police? He tried. They investigated, found nothing suspicious. Your mother wasn't even in the house when Dennis died. She was at a friend's house 20 miles away. Had witnesses. The garage door had been closed, but not locked. Carbon monoxide built up. Dennis was found slumped over the steering wheel. They ruled it accidental. I felt sick. What else? Your mother had a daughter from a previous relationship, before she married Dennis. The daughter's name was Sophie. She would be about 42 now. I have a half-sister? Had. Sophie disappeared when she was 17, shortly before your mother married your father. Police investigated it as a runaway case. Sophie was never found. Marcus pulled out more documents. But I did find something. A death certificate from Las Vegas, Nevada, dated March 2018. Sophie Chen, age 41, died of a drug overdose. The next of kin listed was Laura Jensen. Sophie was alive until 6 years ago? Apparently. The Las Vegas coroner's office still had some of her personal effects in storage. I made some calls. There was a letter among her belongings. A letter she'd written, but never sent. It was addressed to the FBI. Marcus handed me a photocopy. The handwriting was shaky, the paper stained. I started reading. My name is Sophie Chen. My mother is Laura Jensen in Cincinnati, Ohio. When I was 9 years old, my mother suffocated my baby sister, Melissa. I watched her do it. She put a pillow over Melissa's face until she stopped moving. Then she called 911 and said the baby had stopped breathing. They said it was sudden infant death syndrome. My mother collected insurance money. She told me if I ever told anyone, she would kill me too. I ran away when I was 17. I've been running ever since. I've been too scared to come forward. I'm a drug addict. No one would believe me. But I'm dying, and I need someone to know the truth. My mother is a murderer. She killed Melissa in 1982. Please investigate. The letter was dated February 2018. Sophie died 1 month later. I couldn't breathe. Emma wasn't the second victim. She was at least the third. And there was another baby, Melissa, in 1982. I need you to find everything you can about Melissa's death, I told Marcus. Already on it. I'll have more for you in a week. I went home that night and held my children tight. Tyler asked me why I was crying. I told him I just loved him very much. Sarah pulled me aside later and demanded to know what was going on. I finally told her everything. She went pale, then angry, then terrified. We need to go to the police right now. And tell them what? That I suspect my mother killed my sister 30 years ago? That she might have killed her first husband and another baby before that? It's all circumstantial. We need more. Alfonso, your mother is a serial killer. Hearing Sarah say it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. My mother was a serial killer. And she'd gotten away with it for over 40 years. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's face in the few vague memories I had of her. A baby in a yellow blanket. I heard her crying. I wondered if I'd heard her crying that day, the day she died, and hadn't known I was hearing her final moments. Sarah wanted to take the kids and leave, go stay with her parents in Michigan until this was resolved. But I convinced her we needed to act normal. If Mom suspected we knew anything, she might run. Or worse, we hired private security to watch Tyler and Hannah at school. Sarah thought I was being paranoid. Then, we found the GPS tracker. It was attached to the underside of my car, right behind the rear wheel well. A small magnetic box with a blinking red light. Marcus came over to examine it. It was a commercial tracking device, the kind you could buy online for $200. Someone's been following your movements, Marcus said. How long has this been here? I had no idea. Could have been weeks. Could have been since I left Cincinnati. My phone rang. Mom. I almost didn't answer. But Sarah nodded at me. Act normal. Hi, Mom. Alfonso. Her voice was cold. I know you went to see that detective. I know you've been digging around. You need to stop right now. My blood turned to ice. How do you know that? Think about Sarah and your children. Think about what could happen if you keep pushing this. Are you threatening my family? She hung up. 2 seconds later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. Tyler and Hannah on the playground at their school, taken that morning. The next text said, "Drop this. Last warning." Sarah grabbed the phone from my hand and screamed. I called 911 immediately. The police came, took our statements, examined the tracker. But there was no way to prove who had put it there. No fingerprints. The texts came from a burner phone. The photos could have been taken by anyone. The detective assigned to our case, a young woman named Officer Chen, tried to be reassuring. We'll increase patrols around your home and your children's school. But without evidence of who made these threats, there's not much we can do. My mother made those threats, I said. Can you prove that? I couldn't. Officer Chen suggested we get a restraining order, but that would require going to court, making allegations. And what would I allege? That my mother killed my sister 30 years ago and was now threatening my family? I'd sound insane. Marcus called that evening. I found records on Melissa's death. August 1982, Charlotte, North Carolina. 8-month-old baby girl. Cause of death listed as sudden infant death syndrome. Mother was Laura Patterson. She wasn't married yet. Father unknown. The death was investigated briefly, but ruled natural causes. No autopsy was performed, which was standard for SIDS cases back then. Is there anyone from that case we can talk to? The investigating officer died in 2003. But I found the hospital where Melissa was brought. They might still have records. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus and I built a timeline. Laura had given birth to Sophie in 1979. Sophie's father was unknown. In 1982, Laura had another baby, Melissa, also father unknown. Melissa died at 8 months old. Laura collected $50,000 in life insurance, a significant amount in 1982. 3 years later, Laura married Dennis Kramer. 2 years after that, Dennis died of carbon monoxide poisoning. Laura collected $200,000. Shortly after, Sophie ran away at 17. In 1990, Laura married my father, Robert. In 1992, Emma was born. Emma died in 1994, and Laura collected $800,000. In 2024, Robert died, and Laura was set to collect $1 million. The pattern was undeniable. But patterns aren't evidence. I contacted the FBI. I figured if anyone would take this seriously, it would be them. I submitted everything we had. Sophie's letter, the timeline, the insurance policies, the suspicious circumstances. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Special Agent Jennifer Walsh. She wanted to meet. We met at a federal building in Cincinnati. Agent Walsh was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed, no nonsense. She'd reviewed everything I'd sent. "Mr. Jensen, what you've documented here is concerning, but I need to be honest with you. Most of these deaths occurred decades ago. They were investigated and closed. We'd need new evidence to reopen them. What about Sophie's letter? It's compelling. But Sophie is dead. She can't testify. And she admits in the letter that she was a drug addict. A defense attorney would tear that apart. We need physical evidence. What about my father's death? Can you investigate that? Your father died of natural causes. There was no autopsy. Unless we can show reason to suspect foul play, we can't exhume his body. The insurance policy isn't enough? Not on its own. People take out life insurance policies all the time. I felt my hope draining away. So there's nothing you can do. Agent Walsh leaned forward. I didn't say that. I'm going to open an investigation. But it's going to take time. And I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to maintain a relationship with your mother. Act normal. See if she'll talk. People who've gotten away with things for this long sometimes get cocky. They slip up. Can you do that? The thought of sitting across from my mother, making small talk, knowing what she'd done, made me physically ill. But I nodded. One more thing, Agent Walsh said. Be very careful. If your mother suspects you're working with us, you could be in danger. These aren't idle threats she's making. Over the next month, I played the role of dutiful son. I called Mom once a week. I asked about her health, her garden, her plans. She was cold, but civil. She never mentioned the tracker or the threats. She acted as if our confrontation had never happened. But I knew she was watching, waiting. Agent Walsh's team worked in the background. They interviewed old neighbors from Charlotte. They pulled medical records. They contacted insurance companies. And finally, they got a court order to exhume Emma's body. The exhumation took place on a gray October morning. I wasn't allowed to be there, but Agent Walsh called me afterward. We found something, she said. The original autopsy missed it because the technology wasn't as advanced in 1994. But with modern forensic techniques, we found petechial hemorrhages in Emma's eyes. What does that mean? It's tiny burst blood vessels. They occur when someone is suffocated, when pressure is applied to the face, cutting off air. It's not definitive proof of murder, but it strongly suggests Emma's death wasn't accidental. My knees buckled. I sat down hard on the floor. Emma had been murdered. I'd known it in my gut, but hearing it confirmed was different. There's more, Agent Walsh continued. We got a warrant to examine your mother's financial records. She's been purchasing large quantities of prescription medications over the past 2 years. Digitalis, in particular. It's a heart medication. When given in large doses over time, it can cause fatal cardiac arrhythmia. Heart attack. My father. We're getting a warrant to exhume his body. If we find elevated levels of digitalis in his tissue, we can prove he was poisoned. 2 weeks later, the results came back. My father's body contained massive amounts of digitalis, enough to kill him several times over. He'd been poisoned slowly, methodically, over the course of months. We have enough to arrest your mother, Agent Walsh said. But before they could execute the warrant, something else came to light. Agent Walsh called me, her voice urgent. Alfonso, we found something on your mother's computer. Search history for how to stage a car accident, how to cause brake failure. She's been researching these things for the past 3 months. Why would she? We dug deeper. Your mother took out a life insurance policy on your wife. $500,000. She forged Sarah's signature. My vision went dark at the edges. Sarah doesn't know anything about this? No. The policy lists your mother as co-beneficiary, along with you. But there's more. We found drafts of a will on your mother's computer. She's been forging Sarah's signature on a document that leaves everything to your mother as guardian of your children. The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. Mom wasn't just planning to kill Sarah. She was planning to kill both of us. She wanted Tyler and Hannah. She'd been playing the role of loving grandmother for months, winning their affection, while planning to murder their parents and take custody. We also found surveillance in your area, Agent Walsh said. She's been tracking your movements, your wife's schedule, the routes you drive. Alfonso, I think she's planning to act soon. What do we do? We're going to set a trap. But you need to trust me. And you need to do exactly what I say. Agent Walsh laid out the plan in a secure conference room at the FBI field office. Me, Sarah, Marcus, and 3 other agents around the table. Sarah was shaking so badly I had to hold her hand. We need Laura to make a move, Agent Walsh explained. We have strong circumstantial evidence, but a good defense attorney could create reasonable doubt. We need her to incriminate herself. Ideally, we need a confession. You want to use my husband as bait, Sarah said, her voice tight. With full protection. We'll have agents positioned everywhere. Alfonso will be wired. The moment we have what we need, we move in. I agreed immediately. Sarah didn't want me to, but I couldn't let this continue. My mother had murdered at least 4 people. She was planning to murder Sarah and me. She wanted our children. This had to end. First, I had to play my part. I called Mom and told her I'd been thinking about our argument, that grief had made me paranoid, that I wanted to repair our relationship. I apologized for doubting her. I told her I loved her. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then her voice, warm for the first time in months. I love you too, sweetheart. I'm so glad you called. Why don't you bring Sarah and the kids over for dinner this Saturday? I'll make your favorite pot roast. The thought of bringing my children into her house made me want to vomit. But Agent Walsh had anticipated this. Actually, Mom, Sarah's not feeling well. Some kind of stomach bug. And the kids have been exposed, so we're keeping them home. But I could come over Saturday morning and help with your garden like we used to? Another pause. Then, that would be lovely. Come around 9? She agreed too quickly, too eagerly. She was changing her plans. She'd wanted all of us, but she'd settle for just me. Friday night, I barely slept. Sarah cried most of the night. Tyler and Hannah knew something was wrong but didn't understand what. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that his grandmother is trying to kill his parents? Saturday morning arrived gray and cold. Agent Walsh and her team arrived at my house at 7. They fitted me with 2 recording devices, one in my watch and one in my belt buckle. Backup recorders. They couldn't risk losing the audio. The moment you feel unsafe, say the word roses twice in a sentence, Agent Walsh instructed. That's the signal. We'll be in vehicles around the block. We can be inside in 30 seconds. Sarah kissed me at the door. Please don't die. I won't. I promise. The drive to Cincinnati felt surreal. I kept touching the recording devices to make sure they were still there. I rehearsed conversations in my head. I had to get Mom talking. Had to get her to admit what she'd done. I arrived at the house at 9 sharp. Mom was in the front garden, wearing work gloves, kneeling by the rose bushes. She looked up and smiled. It was the warmest smile I'd seen from her in years. It made my skin crawl. Alfonso, right on time. Come, I've made coffee. Inside, the house smelled like it always had. Coffee and lavender. Normal, safe. But I knew better now. This was where Emma had died, where my father had been slowly poisoned. This house was full of ghosts. Mom poured coffee in the kitchen. Her hands were steady. She chatted about the weather, about the neighbors, about her plans to plant tulips in the spring. Normal conversation. Like she wasn't a serial killer. I'm glad you came, she finally said. I've missed you. I've missed you too, I lied. I'm sorry about before, about the insurance policy. I wasn't thinking straight. You were grieving. People do strange things when they grieve. She sipped her coffee. Your father took his death very hard. His death? Emma's death. Your father was never the same after we lost her. This was an opening. I took it. You never talk about Emma. Mom's smile faded slightly. It's too painful. I wish I remembered her better. I was so young. She was a beautiful baby. Mom stared into her coffee. But she cried constantly, day and night. Nothing we did helped. Your father wanted to take her to specialists, but I knew it wouldn't help. Some babies are just difficult. That must have been hard on you. You have no idea. Her voice had an edge now. I was exhausted, sleep-deprived. Your father was working all the time. It was just me, and that screaming baby, day after day, week after week. Is that why you took out the insurance policy? Her eyes snapped to mine. What? The insurance policy on Emma. Is that why you did it? Because you knew you couldn't handle her anymore? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Mom set down her coffee cup carefully. I think you should leave. I spoke to Detective Morrison. He told me about the neighbor who heard Emma crying for 30 minutes. Then sudden silence. That woman was a liar. Always spying, always gossiping. I read Sophie's letter. Mom went absolutely still. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't breathe. Then she laughed. It was a cold, brittle sound. Sophie was a drug addict who died in a gutter. Nobody would believe anything she said. She said you killed Melissa. Melissa died of SIDS. It was tragic. Just like Emma died of SIDS. Just like Dennis died in a tragic accident. Just like Dad died of a heart attack. Mom stood up. You need to leave. Now. I stayed seated. I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth. Her face transformed. The warm, grandmotherly expression melted away, replaced by something cold and reptilian. You want the truth? Fine. Emma wouldn't stop crying. For hours and hours, every single day. I tried everything. Nothing worked. So one afternoon, when she was supposed to be napping, I went into her room. I put a pillow over her face. It only took 3 minutes. 3 quiet, peaceful minutes. And then she was finally silent. My hands were shaking so badly. I had to grip the edge of the table. She'd just confessed. The FBI was recording every word. But she wasn't done. Dennis figured out I'd been stealing from him. He was going to divorce me and take everything. So I fixed it. Carbon monoxide is odorless, colorless. He never knew what hit him. And Sophie? Sophie saw what I did to Melissa. She was going to tell. I couldn't let that happen, so I convinced her to run away. Told her I'd find her and kill her if she ever came back. Turns out I didn't have to. The drugs did my work for me. And Dad? Mom smiled. It was the most horrible thing I'd ever seen. Your father grew a conscience. After all these years, he suddenly decided he needed to confess. Told me he was going to the police, that he couldn't live with the guilt anymore. The guilt of knowing what I'd done to Emma and keeping quiet. So I ground up his heart medication and started putting it in his food. A little more each day. His poor old heart couldn't take it. Tears were streaming down my face. Why? Why did you do all of this? Because I could. Because people are easy to manipulate. Because insurance companies pay out without asking too many questions. Because I'm smarter than everyone else. She leaned across the table. And because you, my dear son, were about to become my next project. What are you talking about? You and that simpering wife of yours? Did you really think I didn't notice you investigating me? Did you think I didn't have a plan? I was going to kill you both. Stage a nice car accident. Faulty brakes. Tragic. And then I'd take Tyler and Hannah. Raise them right. Maybe even take out policies on them in a few years. The coffee cup slipped from my numb fingers and shattered on the floor. You were going to kill my children? Not immediately. I'd wait a few years. Let them grow attached to me. Then, accidents happen. She tilted her head. But now you've ruined everything with your snooping. So, I'm going to have to move up my timeline. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan. I saw the gun a second before she pulled it out. A small revolver, black and deadly. We're going to take a walk outside, she said calmly. To the garden shed. You're going to have a terrible accident with the power saw. So much blood. I'll be devastated. Poor Alfonso. Always so careless with tools. My mouth was dry. Roses. Roses. She frowned. What? I said roses. Your roses look beautiful. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You're wearing a wire. She lunged across the table. I threw myself backward, the chair crashing to the floor. She came around the table, gun raised. How long have they been listening? Long enough. She aimed the gun at my chest. Then they heard me confess, which means I have nothing left to lose. The front door exploded inward. FBI, drop the weapon. But Mom didn't drop it. She kept it trained on me. If I'm going down, you're coming with me. Agent Walsh and 3 other agents filled the kitchen doorway, guns drawn. Laura Jensen, drop the weapon now. Mom's finger tightened on the trigger. I saw it happening in slow motion. I dove to the side. The gun went off. The bullet slammed into the cabinet behind where I'd been standing. Then agents were on her. The gun clattered to the floor. Mom was screaming, thrashing, fighting like a wild animal. It took 3 agents to wrestle her to the ground and get handcuffs on her. Agent Walsh helped me up. Are you hurt? I shook my head. I couldn't speak. I watched as they dragged my mother, still screaming, out of the house. She was yelling that they couldn't prove anything, that she had lawyers, that she'd beat this like she'd beaten everything else. But she was wrong. We had it all on tape. Every word, every confession, every murder. I sat on the kitchen floor and sobbed. They held Mom without bail at the Hamilton County Justice Center. Within 24 hours, every news station in Ohio was covering the story. Serial killer mother. Multiple victims spanning 40 years. The headlines were sensational and horrible. Agent Walsh kept me updated on the investigation. They'd formally charged Mom with 4 counts of first-degree murder. Emma, Dennis, Melissa, and Robert. They were still building cases for Sophie's death and the attempted murders of Sarah and me. Your mother is represented by one of the best criminal defense attorneys in the state, Agent Walsh told me during one of our many meetings. Clayton Hughes. He's already started working on her defense. He's claiming the confession was coerced, that she was confused and scared when she said those things. There's a recording. He'll argue you entrapped her, that the FBI set up an illegal sting. He's good, Alfonso. Very good. We need to build an airtight case. The forensic evidence was mounting. The digitalis in Dad's body. The petechial hemorrhages in Emma's exhumed remains. They'd even found traces of the same substance in old blood samples from Melissa's autopsy, which the hospital in Charlotte had retained. But Agent Walsh kept warning me that defense attorneys were skilled at creating reasonable doubt. The worst part was maintaining any semblance of normal life. Tyler and Hannah knew their grandmother had been arrested, but didn't understand why. Sarah and I decided to tell them she'd done something wrong and needed to face consequences. But we didn't go into details. How could we? They were 8 and 6 years old. School became a nightmare. Other kids had seen the news. They asked Tyler if his grandma was really a killer. He came home crying twice in the first week. We considered moving, starting over somewhere else. But Agent Walsh asked us to stay. She might need us to testify. 3 weeks after Mom's arrest, I got a call from Carl Kramer, Dennis's brother. He'd seen the news coverage. He was crying on the phone. I knew it, he kept saying. I knew she killed him. Thank you for not letting her get away with it. Carl flew to Cincinnati to give a formal statement to the FBI. He brought Dennis's journal, the one he'd hidden for 37 years. The journal was heartbreaking. Entries about Dennis's growing fear of Laura, about catching her in lies, about the forged checks, about his plans to divorce her. The final entry, written the day before he died, said, "If you're reading this and I'm dead, Laura did it." The prosecutors were ecstatic. The journal gave them motive for Dennis's murder. Combined with the suspicious life insurance policy and the convenient timing of his death, it was powerful evidence. But Clayton Hughes, Mom's attorney, held a press conference. He stood on the courthouse steps and declared that Laura Jensen was innocent, that she was a grieving mother who'd lost 2 children to tragic natural causes, that the FBI had manipulated a confused elderly woman into making false statements, that the so-called evidence was circumstantial and would be torn apart in court. Laura Jensen will be vindicated, Hughes said confidently, and those who have made these baseless accusations will be held accountable. I watched the press conference on TV and felt sick. He was good, articulate, confident, convincing. A jury might believe him. Sarah and I started getting hate mail. People who believed Mom was being railroaded. Anonymous letters calling me a liar, calling Sarah a gold digger, saying we'd fabricated everything to steal Mom's inheritance. Someone spray-painted liar across our garage door. We had to hire security guards. The strain was destroying our marriage. Sarah barely slept. She'd lost 15 pounds. She couldn't look at me without crying. One night, she finally broke. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "I can't live in fear. I can't watch our children suffer. We need to leave. We need to take the kids and go somewhere she'll never find us." "She's in jail, Sarah. What if she gets out? What if Hughes gets her off? What if she walks?" "She won't. You don't know that." She was right. I didn't know that. Criminal trials were unpredictable, and Mom had gotten away with murder 4 times before. What if she did it again? Agent Walsh called with bad news 4 weeks after the arrest. "The judge is allowing a hearing on Clayton Hughes's motion to suppress your mother's confession. He's arguing that the FBI conducted an illegal interrogation without proper Miranda warnings." I wasn't interrogating her. I was having a conversation with my mother. "You were acting as an agent of the FBI. You were wired. Hughes is going to argue that makes it an official interrogation, and we should have read her rights before you engaged her. What happens if the judge agrees? The confession gets thrown out. We'd still have the forensic evidence, but it would be a much weaker case." The hearing was scheduled for December 15th. I had to testify. Clayton Hughes cross-examined me for 4 hours. He was brutal. He made it sound like I was a vengeful son who'd manipulated my poor, grieving mother. He made me look like a monster. When I finally left the stand, I felt completely defeated. The judge said she'd issue a ruling within 2 weeks. Meanwhile, the media circus continued. A true crime podcast devoted 3 episodes to The Black Widow of Cincinnati. A production company wanted to make a movie. Publishers offered 6-figure advances for the book rights. Everyone wanted a piece of the horror. I just wanted it to end. Then Agent Walsh called with something unexpected. We found another victim. Or rather, a potential victim. A woman named Patricia Morrison. She was married to Frank Morrison, the detective who investigated Emma's death. Detective Morrison was married? He was. His wife died 2 years after Emma, in 1996. Cardiac arrest. She was only 53 years old. No history of heart disease. My blood went cold. "You think my mother killed the detective's wife?" "We're looking into it." Morrison told us that after he closed Emma's case, he kept investigating on his own. Unofficially, your mother found out. She confronted him, threatened to sue for harassment. 2 months later, his wife died. Morrison told us he always suspected Laura had something to do with it, but he could never prove it. He was so devastated by his wife's death that he stopped investigating. Another victim. Another life destroyed. How many more were there? How many deaths had Mom gotten away with? The judge's ruling came back on December 20th. The confession was admissible. Hughes had failed to suppress it. It was a major victory for the prosecution. But Hughes wasn't done. At a pretrial hearing in January, he pulled another move. He filed a motion for separate trials for each victim. If granted, the prosecution would have to try Mom 4 times, once for each murder. It would take years. And if she was acquitted on even one charge, Hughes could argue reasonable doubt for the others. "This is a stalling tactic," Agent Walsh explained. "He wants to drag this out, exhaust the prosecution's resources, hope that witnesses die or evidence gets lost. It's dirty, but effective." The judge denied the motion. All charges would be tried together in one trial, but Hughes had succeeded in delaying the trial date. It was pushed from March to July. 7 months of living in limbo. 7 months of waiting. 7 months of wondering if justice would ever come. Then in February, something happened that changed everything. Clayton Hughes withdrew from the case. No explanation. He just filed a motion to be removed as Mom's attorney. The court granted it. Agent Walsh found out why. Hughes discovered evidence that would have required him to commit perjury. As an officer of the court, He couldn't do it. So he quit. What evidence? I can't tell you yet. But it's bad for your mother. Very bad. Mom was assigned a public defender, a young attorney named Kevin Hart who was in way over his head. Within a week, he was filing motions to negotiate a plea deal. The prosecution refused. They wanted Mom to go to trial and face the maximum sentence. In March, Hart called me directly. It was highly unusual for defense counsel to contact the victim's family, but he was desperate. "Your mother wants to talk to you," he said. "Absolutely not. She says she has information you need to hear. About your father." I hesitated. Agent Walsh advised against it. Sarah begged me not to go, but I needed to know. What information could Mom possibly have about Dad? I agreed to meet her at the jail. It would be recorded. Agent Walsh and a prosecutor would be present in the adjacent room, watching through one-way glass. On March 15th, I sat across from my mother for the first time since her arrest. She looked different, thinner, older, jails, age people, but her eyes were the same, cold, calculating. "Thank you for coming," she said. I didn't respond. "I need to tell you something about your father, something you don't know. I'm not interested in your lies. This isn't a lie. Your father kept journals, hidden journals. They're in the house, in a safe behind the painting of the ocean in the master bedroom. The combination is your birthday. Month, day, year. Why are you telling me this?" She leaned forward. "Because those journals contain the truth, the whole truth, about Emma, about everything. Your father knew, Alfonso. He knew what I'd done, and he helped me cover it up." I stood up to leave. "Read the journals," she called after me. "Then decide if I'm the only monster in this family." I didn't want to believe her, but that night, I couldn't sleep. Finally, at 2 a.m, I drove to Cincinnati. I let myself into Mom's house with the key the FBI had given me. I went to the master bedroom. Behind the painting of the ocean was indeed a safe. I entered my birthday. The safe opened. Inside were 3 leather-bound journals. I sat on the floor and started reading. By dawn, I'd finished all 3. I was shaking, crying. The journals confirmed everything Mom had confessed to, but they also revealed something I hadn't known. Dad had suspected what happened to Emma. Not immediately, but in the weeks and months after her death. He'd found the insurance policy and asked Mom about it. She'd broken down and told him everything. About Melissa, about Dennis, about how she couldn't handle crying babies, how something in her just snapped. And my father, instead of going to the police, had helped her. He'd coached her on what to say to Detective Morrison. He'd supported her alibi. He'd made sure the investigation went away. Because he loved her. Because he couldn't bear to lose his wife and watch his son grow up without a mother. But the guilt ate at him for 30 years. The journals were full of self-loathing. He called himself a coward. He said he'd traded Emma's justice for his own comfort. He wrote that he deserved to die for what he'd helped cover up. The final entry was dated 6 months before his death. He wrote, "I can't live with this anymore. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to make this right, even if it destroys everything. Laura knows. She's been looking at me differently. I'm afraid of what she might do. If something happens to me, know that I loved you, Alfonso. I'm sorry I was too weak to protect Emma. I'm sorry for everything. My father had been murdered because he'd finally found the courage to tell the truth." I took the journals to Agent Walsh. She read them in silence. When she finished, she looked at me with pity. "This doesn't change anything legally," she said. "Your mother is still guilty of 4 murders, but I'm sorry you had to learn this about your father." I went home and told Sarah. She held me while I cried. My father had been a good man who'd made a terrible choice. He'd spent 30 years paying for it, and in the end, it had gotten him killed. The trial was set to begin in 3 weeks. July arrived hot and oppressive. The trial of Laura Jensen began on July 8th at the Hamilton County Courthouse. The media circus was insane. News trucks lined the streets. Reporters shouted questions. Protesters held signs, some supporting Mom, others demanding justice for her victims. Sarah and I sat in the courtroom every day. Carl Kramer flew in from Phoenix. Frank Morrison, now 73, came out of his nursing home to attend. Patricia Brennan, the neighbor who'd heard Emma crying, was there despite her advanced age. We were united in our need to see justice done. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Rachel Kim, a fierce woman in her 50s with a perfect conviction record. She laid out the case methodically. 4 murders spanning 40 years. A pattern of behavior. Life insurance policies. Suspicious deaths. The forensic evidence. The confession. Kevin Hart did his best, but he was outmatched. His strategy was to attack the credibility of the confession, to argue that Mom had been confused and scared, that she'd said whatever she thought the FBI wanted to hear. But when they played the audio recording in court, it was damning. Mom's voice was calm, clear, even proud, as she described killing Emma, Dennis, and Robert. I testified on day 3. Rachel Kim walked me through finding the insurance policy, discovering the truth, contacting the FBI. Hart tried to paint me as a money-hungry son looking for revenge, but it fell flat. The jury could see my pain was real. Sarah testified on day 4. She described the threats, the GPS tracker, the photos of our children. Several jurors looked horrified. Patricia Brennan testified on day 5. She was shaky but clear. She described hearing Emma cry frantically that afternoon. Then sudden silence. She described how Laura had always seemed cold toward Emma, how she documented her concerns in her diary. The diary itself was entered into evidence. Carl Kramer testified on day 6. He told the jury about Dennis's fears, about the forged checks, about Dennis's certainty that Laura would kill him if he tried to leave. He read from Dennis's journal, his voice breaking. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. The forensic experts testified over 3 days. They explained the digitalis poisoning in Robert's body. They explained the petechial hemorrhages in Emma's eyes. They explained the probability that all these deaths being natural was statistically impossible. On day 12, Agent Walsh testified. She walked the jury through the entire investigation. She explained how they'd built the case, how they'd set up the meeting with Mom, how Mom had confessed to everything, and even pulled a gun. The defense rested without calling any witnesses. Kevin Hart couldn't risk putting Mom on the stand. In closing arguments, he made a half-hearted attempt to argue reasonable doubt, but everyone in the courtroom knew it was over. Rachel Kim's closing was powerful. She showed the jury photos of Emma as a baby, of Melissa, of Dennis, of Robert. She made them human, not just names on a charging document. She described how Mom had systematically murdered people for money, then erased them from existence. How she'd planned to kill her own son and daughter-in-law. How she'd even planned to eventually kill her grandchildren. Laura Jensen is not just a murderer, Rachel Kim said. She's a predator. She's a monster who hid behind the mask of a grieving mother, a loving wife, a doting grandmother. But we've seen behind that mask. We've heard her own words describing her crimes. We've seen the evidence of her cruelty. Justice has been delayed for 40 years. Don't let it be denied any longer. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. 4 counts of first-degree murder. 2 counts of attempted murder. Multiple counts of fraud and forgery. Mom showed no emotion. She sat perfectly still, her face blank. But when the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, she stood. I'd like to address the court. Kevin Hart tried to stop her, but she waved him off. She turned and looked directly at me. My son thinks he won. He thinks he got justice for Emma and the others. But here's what he doesn't understand. I don't regret what I did. Emma was a burden. Dennis was a problem. Melissa was a mistake. Robert was a liability. I removed obstacles from my life. That's not murder. That's problem solving. People in the courtroom gasped. The judge banged her gavel for order. Mom continued, her voice calm. Alfonso, you think you gave me some kind of harsh reminder by bringing all this to light. But you haven't hurt me. I've lived 73 years exactly as I wanted. I got rid of people who annoyed me. I collected money. I lived comfortably. Even now, sitting in this courtroom, I have no remorse. Because they weren't really people to me. They were things. Inconvenient things. Sarah grabbed my hand, squeezing tight. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. So yes, I killed them. All of them. And if I had the chance, I'd do it again. Because their lives meant nothing. Emma's life meant nothing. She was just a crying, demanding baby. I'm only sorry I didn't do it sooner. The courtroom erupted. People were shouting. The judge was banging her gavel. Bailiffs moved toward Mom, but she wasn't done. She looked at me one last time. You want to remember Emma? Fine. Remember her. But know that every breath you take for the rest of your life, you'll be thinking about me. Wondering if I'm the only monster, or if you have it in you too. You're my son, after all. My blood runs in your veins. Sleep well, Alfonso. They dragged her out. She was still smiling. The judge sentenced her to 4 consecutive life sentences, without the possibility of parole. She would die in prison. But even that didn't feel like enough. She'd taken so much from so many people. She'd destroyed families. She'd murdered children. And she felt nothing. I left the courthouse in a daze. Reporters shouted questions. Camera flashes blinded me. Sarah got me to the car. I sat in the passenger seat and stared at nothing. It's over, Sarah whispered. It's finally over. But it wasn't over. Because Mom was right about one thing. I would think about her every day for the rest of my life. She'd made sure of that. The weeks after the trial were strange. People kept telling me I should feel closure, feel justice, feel relief. But mostly, I felt empty. Mom was in prison, but Emma was still dead. Dad was still dead. Dennis and Melissa and Patricia Morrison were still dead. Nothing I'd done brought them back. I tried to return to normal life. Went back to work. Helped Tyler with homework. Played in the backyard with Hannah. But I was going through the motions. Sarah could see it. She suggested therapy. I went. It helped. Slowly. Then one day in September, 3 months after the trial, I was cleaning out my garage and found an old box of photos. They were from my childhood, stuff Mom hadn't destroyed. And there, at the bottom, I found a picture I didn't remember ever seeing. It was Emma. She was maybe 18 months old, sitting in a high chair, covered in what looked like spaghetti sauce, laughing, just laughing, pure joy on her face. She'd been a real person. She'd had a personality. She'd experienced happiness. For 30 years, Mom had erased her. No photos on the walls, no stories shared, no acknowledgement that Emma had ever existed. It was like Mom had murdered her twice. Once physically, then again by making her disappear from family memory. That's when I knew what I needed to do. I drove to Cincinnati and went to visit Patricia Brennan. She was 83 now, frail but sharp-minded. I asked her about the photos she'd mentioned in her diary, the ones from the neighborhood barbecue in September of 1993. She pulled out an old album, and there they were. A dozen photos from a sunny afternoon 32 years ago. Emma in several of them. In one photo, she was in Mom's arms, and you could see the bruises on Emma's tiny arms. Dark marks, finger-shaped. Patricia had documented it but had been dismissed as an interfering busybody. I should have done more, Patricia said, tears in her eyes. I saw the signs. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to believe a mother could hurt her own child. It's not your fault, I told her. You tried. You reported what you heard. You kept records. You did more than most people would have. She gave me copies of the photos. I took them home and spread them out on my desk. Emma's face, frozen in time. A little girl who deserved so much more than 24 months of life. I started writing. At first, it was just for me. A way to process everything. But then, it became something more. I was telling Emma's story. I was making sure the world knew her name, knew what had happened to her, knew that she'd mattered. I worked on it for 6 months. Sarah read drafts and cried. Tyler and Hannah asked questions, and I answered them honestly. I told them about their Aunt Emma, about their grandfather's mistakes, about the importance of truth and justice, even when it's painful. When the manuscript was finished, I sent it to publishers. 3 made offers. I accepted the one that promised the widest distribution and the biggest publicity campaign. I wanted Emma's story to reach as many people as possible. The book was published in May, almost exactly a year after the trial. It was called Emma's Voice: A Sister's Murder and a Family's Reckoning. Within 2 weeks, it hit the New York Times bestseller list. Within a month, it was #1. I went on a book tour. 30 cities in 45 days. Every interview I showed Emma's photo. Every reading, I talked about who she'd been, what she'd loved, how she deserved a life. I refused to let her be just a victim. She was Emma. She was real. She'd mattered. All the proceeds from the book went to establishing the Emma Memorial Foundation. We funded child abuse prevention programs, supported foster children, trained mandatory reporters to recognize signs of abuse. We turned Emma's murder into something that saved other children. I had Emma's grave marker replaced. The old one just had her name and dates. The new one was beautiful white marble with an angel. It read, Emma Grace Jensen, beloved daughter and sister, forever remembered, forever loved. Her light continues through those she inspires. I visit her grave every month. Sometimes I bring Tyler and Hannah. They bring flowers. They tell Emma about their lives. They make sure she's not forgotten. At home, Emma's photo hangs in our living room, right next to the photos of Tyler and Hannah. When guests ask about her, I tell them everything. I refuse to hide her or erase her or pretend she didn't exist. That's my reminder to Mom. She tried to erase Emma, tried to make it like she'd never been born. She thought she could murder Emma and then murder her memory and get away with both. But I brought Emma back. I made Emma matter. I made Emma's story reach millions of people. Mom wanted Emma forgotten. Instead, Emma became unforgettable. I wrote to Mom in prison once. Just once. I told her that Emma's book had been nominated for a National Book Award, that there was going to be a documentary about Emma's life, that elementary schools were using Emma's story to teach children about speaking up when they see abuse, that Emma's name was being spoken in classrooms and churches and community centers across the country. I told her that her great-grandchildren, Tyler and Hannah, knew all about Emma, that we talked about Emma regularly, that Emma was part of our family in a way she'd never been when she was alive, that when Tyler and Hannah had children someday, they would tell them about Emma too, that Emma's memory would be passed down through generations, while Mom's memory would die in a prison cell. I told her that history would remember Emma as a victim who inspired change, while history would remember her as nothing but a monster, that Emma's legacy would be love and awareness and protection for other children, that Mom's legacy would be nothing but evil. I told her that she'd spent 40 years trying to make Emma disappear, but I'd spent 1 year making sure Emma would never be forgotten. That every time someone read the book, every time someone donated to the foundation, every time someone shared Emma's story, it was a reminder that Mom had failed. She'd murdered Emma's body, but she couldn't murder Emma's soul. Emma lived on. Emma mattered. Emma won. Mom never wrote back. I didn't expect her to. But I know she got the letter. The prison confirmed it. A few months ago, I got a call from a woman in Oregon. She'd read Emma's book. She said it had saved her daughter's life. She'd recognized signs of abuse in her sister's home, signs she'd been ignoring because she didn't want to believe her sister could hurt her own child. But after reading about Patricia Brennan's regrets, about how she'd seen signs and not done enough, the woman in Oregon had called Child Protective Services. They'd found evidence of severe abuse. The child was removed and placed in safety. She was alive because of Emma's story. I've gotten dozens of letters like that. Teachers who learned to watch for bruises. Neighbors who learned to trust their instincts. Parents who learned the warning signs. Emma's death had saved other children. That was the legacy I'd built for her. That's the harshest reminder I could give my mother. Not revenge, not violence, not even the prison sentence. The harshest reminder was making Emma matter, making Emma remembered, making Emma's brief life mean something profound and lasting. Mom wanted Emma erased. I made Emma eternal. I learned something through all of this. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoration. It's about taking something broken and making it whole again. I couldn't bring Emma back. I couldn't give her the 70 years of life Mom stole from her. But I could give her something else. I could give her a voice. I could give her impact. I could make sure that her 24 months of life echoed through the decades. Every morning, I wake up and look at Emma's photo in our living room. I say good morning to her. I tell her I love her. I promise her, again, that I won't let her be forgotten. Tyler is 16 now. Hannah is 14. They've grown up knowing their Aunt Emma. They've grown up understanding that truth matters, that justice matters, that every life has value. They've grown up better because they know Emma's story. Sometimes Hannah asks me if I think Emma knows, wherever she is, that people remember her. I tell her yes. I tell her that love transcends death, that memory is a form of immortality, that Emma's spirit lives on in every child we help through the foundation. I choose to believe that. I have to believe that. Because the alternative is that Emma's suffering meant nothing, and I refuse to accept that. Mom will die in prison. She's 74 now, in poor health. She'll likely be gone within a few years. When she dies, there will be no funeral, no mourners, no one to remember her with love. She'll be buried in a prison cemetery with just a number on her headstone. That's what she earned. But Emma will live forever. In the book, in the foundation, in the documentary, in the hearts of everyone who's been touched by her story. In the children who've been saved because someone recognized the signs of abuse and spoke up. In the future generations of our family who will know her name and her story. For 30 years, I didn't know my sister. Mom made sure of that. But now I know her. I know her through the research I did, through the people who remembered her, through the photos I found, through the impact her story has had. I know Emma better now than I ever did when she was alive. And I'll make sure the world knows her too. That's my promise to her. That's my reminder to Mom. That's my purpose. You can't murder someone twice. You can kill a body, but you can't kill a truth. Emma existed. She lived. She mattered. And no one, not even the person who murdered her, can take that away. So here's what I want to ask you, because Emma's story isn't just about the past. It's about now. It's about the children in your neighborhood, in your family, in your community. Have you seen signs that something might be wrong? Have you noticed bruises, heard crying that didn't sound right, felt that instinct that tells you a child might be in danger? Don't be like Patricia Brennan and live with decades of regret. Don't be like my father and let fear keep you silent. If you see something, say something. Call Child Protective Services. Call the police. Save a life. Be the person who acts before it's too late. If Emma's story moved you, please share it. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. Comment below and tell me about someone you remember, someone whose life mattered, someone who deserves to be remembered. Let's make sure no child is forgotten. Let's make sure no victim becomes invisible. Thank you for listening to Emma's story. Thank you for helping me keep her memory alive. Thank you for being the kind of person who cares, who pays attention, who might just save a child's life because you were willing to act. I'm Alfonso, and I'll never stop telling Emma's story. I hope you'll help me make sure she's never forgotten. Take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, every life matters. Every voice deserves to be heard. Every child deserves to be protected. Emma's voice couldn't save her. But maybe, through all of us, it can save someone else.